Joining us today, retired U.S. Army Colonel John Sweet and Foreign Affairs Analyst Mark Toth. Thank you for your time, for being with us, and welcome to our program.
Hey, Sofia, thank you. And Daniel, thank you for having us back on the show.
Sofia and Daniel, thank you.
It was the second night when Ukraine has launched more drones than Russia. Around 250 drones targeted oil refinery and energy facilities, leaving thousands Russians in Belgorod without electricity. And get this, The Economist reports that Ukraine is already using long-range Flamingo missiles to strike inside Russia. And we recently discussed whether Russians would actually feel the blackout, and here we are. Mark, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think clearly we're in a drone war right now, and clearly this is about two things here. It's denying sanctuary to the Russians, saying you're not going to get this space anymore for free, that we're going to try to interdict your forces, et cetera, coming into the battlefields in Ukraine, either close by or further away. And these long-range strike weapons are able to do that. It's also about messaging, and Zelensky himself said it. He's saying, look, if you're going to attack our energy infrastructure, and they've been going, the Russians have been going after the power grid considerably over the last month or so in Ukraine ahead of winter, then we're going to do the same. If Russia's going to weaponize winter, then we're going to try to do it back to you. So there's really two things happening here. And I think Ukraine's got to send this message. Russia does not deserve sanctuary. They've had it too many times in this war because of bad political decisions in the West. And also, it's not fair that Russia can weaponize winter, leaving Ukrainians to be cold, et cetera, during it. Zelensky has got to show that Ukraine is willing to give as good as it gets.
The Economist pointed a very interesting actually point about Flamingo missiles, but yesterday President Zelensky has not confirmed the use of these Flamingo long-range missiles yet, but he did say that those recent strikes and attacks, what we've seen, were not just done only by drones. So, John, from a military standpoint, do you think Ukraine has already used these long-range missiles? And if so, how effective could they be on the battlefield? Could this actually change and shift the course of the war?
Sure. So the Flamingo obviously gives them increased distance to strike those targets within the interior of Russia. So yes, I do think he's used those missiles, whether in the interior of Russia or if they use those missiles towards Crimea to isolate Russian forces there. So it's a valuable tool, along with the Neptune, along with the drones that they're shooting. The other valuable tool, and I'm sure we'll get to that shortly, is the introduction possibly of the Tomahawk missile, which affords the Ukrainian military the ability to use that particular missile system against military targets while they use their own organic systems against those energy-producing targets and those power stations to inflict, if you will, greater damage to the economy of Russia, but also bring a little bit of the, if you will, suffering to the Russian people in terms of electricity, not in terms of targeting Russian citizens, because Ukraine has not done that.
And at the same time, right now, Ukraine is expecting to get U.S. long-range Tomahawk missiles. And at the same time, the Economist writes that Ukraine could be soon producing up to 7 of its own Flamingo missiles every day. John, how do these systems stack up? Can you maybe compare their effectiveness and their possible impacts and results? Are we talking now about totally different capabilities, or could actually Ukraine's these missiles rival the American one?
Well, sure. Both missile systems have extended ranges, which is what Ukraine's looking for. The Tomahawk has much more, if you will, precision deep strike capability. It uses guidance systems to get them from the point of launch to the impact area. The other thing about the Tomahawk missile, obviously, it has two variants. One carries a 1,000-pound explosive. The other carries combined effects bomblet. So in effect, a cluster munition. But the thing about the most important thing about the Tomahawk is that it flies at a low altitude. It flies at a high subsonic speed. It's piloted over evasive routes, and it has a unique capability to loiter over its target. So to strike the target when it's most optimal. Okay, so that's fundamentally the difference. They each have length as far as ability to strike targets, but the Tomahawk gives you much more capability and a better chance for the missile to arrive at the impact zone. Given the air defense networks that Russia has, the Tomahawk and obviously the Flamingo and the Neptune have been successful. Well, the Tomahawk brings greater depth and accuracy, though.
Meanwhile, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin warns that the possible delivery of U.S. Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine could damage U.S.-Russia relations. Mark, do you feel that Trump would pursue these threats differently than President Biden did? Could this work with Trump's administration? Could Trump's team be afraid of such rhetoric? And second question would be, is Ukraine heading to these Tomahawk missiles? Are we close enough to receive them? Do you feel that President Trump recently mentioning this Tomahawk missile was saying that yes, we would greenlight this supply of weapons?
Yeah, Daniel, I think, and I'm going to grab some words from John here, as he likes to say, we've seen this movie before. Putin often, whether it's been with HIMARS, with Patriots, with Abrams tanks, with the F-16s, is always saying, look, that's going to be a deal breaker. It's all going to fall apart. He did that with Biden. He tapped him out for a long time. And now he's simply trying to do the same thing to stop the U.S. from giving Ukraine Tomahawks. I think in the end, it's not going to work. Look, as John can explain better than me, the Tomahawk, what it gives you is added payload. And he referenced that in terms of the 1,000-pound capability, et cetera, along with the cluster munition formation of it. But it can hit harder, not only get there faster, get there more efficiently, and get there on target. It can do a lot more damage. And that could be key, not just with military targets, but if, for instance, going against drone targets, production sites, et cetera, inside of Russia. One site alone, George Barros at the ISW was saying this is producing 2,700 drones a month that are attacking. And Lviv, where Daniel, you're sitting, your city just got hit with 500 of these things, along with some ballistic missiles over the weekend. And so they could take that out. So if those are producing 2,700 a month, you can see the impact on the war. So Tomahawks are needed. They add to the suite of weapons that Ukraine has. And I think Trump will get there. Look, his comments so far have been he doesn't want to escalate the war, but it's very clear that Putin is escalating at this point. He's taking the fight deeper into Western Ukraine. He's going after the energy infrastructure again. And Ukraine has to have a way to go back, because if not, then Russia is being allowed to escalate the war with Ukraine not having adequate defenses against it. So I am hopeful. Again, Trump's his own man. We can't predict him, but I'm hopeful that we'll get there.
And Mark, do you expect Trump's administration to get a tougher stance on Kremlin if President Trump finally secures this peace deal on Gaza?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the Gaza deal has a long ways to go. I think we've noticed, as John and I have covered that particular war, that conflict, that Iran and its proxies, be it Hamas, Hezbollah, et cetera, are very good at saying yes when they really mean no. And so I think it's just too early to draw any conclusions that that's going to lead to a deal. Yes, on the surface, Hamas has said we accept everything. I know that Qatar and Egypt have announced that all the agreements have been met, except now they're saying it's time to negotiate. But as we've seen with Iran, they believe in negotiating forever, and that's not going to cut it. You had one Hamas official, for instance, saying it could take months to figure out just the hostages alone. So to me, that's just playing for a timeout. And so in terms of how that applies itself to Ukraine, I think it's just too soon. I mean, if something were to happen quickly, I hope it does for the people on the ground who are suffering in Gaza, then it could have a possible effect, because it takes a different part of the board and gives a win to the West, if you will, a win to Trump, which only helps put pressure back on Putin. But I think that's a big ask right now. Hope it happens. I doubt it does.
Let's also cover Kremlin's thinking. Today is Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's birthday. Mark, what would you say to him if you had a chance?
Nothing I can repeat on TV, right? I think at this point, trying to address someone that's willing to kill people, not just 1.1 million that he's killed and wounded of his own people, but the heinous war crimes that he's committed against Ukrainians, the kidnapping of children, the killing of children in your own city, the 15-year-old girl who lost her life over the weekend. Those are things that just make it nearly impossible to have a discussion with someone like Putin. I mean, obviously we have to. He's a man that has nukes, not that he's ever going to use them, but it's not likely that you're going to be able to forcibly evict him from power. But at some point, if I were to face with him, I would just say, well, what happened to you? Where did your humanity go? Did you ever have it? But none of that's going to be effective. I think Putin has proven who he is. He just doesn't care. He doesn't have the same values that you and I have. He doesn't care about human life in the same way that John and I do. And so, while that conversation, if it happened, I'm not going to be a Tucker Carlson. I just couldn't hold back. I mean, the guy is an evil guy, and he deserves to be condemned. And the sooner he's gone from this earth, the better.
And Mark, do you feel that he's celebrating his birthday with real allies, genuine allies, or just with people who can afford to say no to him?
Yeah, Daniel, that's a great question. I don't know. I think people like Putin at some point start to delude themselves. Russian history has shown that leaders like Putin, whether it was the Tsar Nicholas or whether ultimately it was Gorbachev getting caught off guard, tend to fall hard and fast. I don't think we're there yet. So from that standpoint, Putin may not be seeing clearly those around him. If I were him, I'd be looking over my shoulder at the FSB. I mean, look, others have said it before me, but basically Russia is a security state, with a nation attached to it, a gas station as well. And that's the power base of it. And I think when the FSB has had enough, and the other intelligence agencies that broke off from the KGB in the aftermath of the Soviet Union, I think when they've had enough of Putin, you'll see a change. So if I'm him, look, he may be thinking he's celebrating with friends, but in reality, he may be celebrating with people that are saying, look, we can't take any more of this. You're destroying the country, the economy, et cetera, and we're not going to recover from this for a long time. But I'd be wary. I don't think it's a happy birthday, even though he might smile.
According to Reuters, between 1,000 and 5,000 soldiers from Cuba are reportedly fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. Mark, what does this tell about Moscow's growing reliance on its foreign partners and allies, and why would militaries from this country end up on the front line of this war?
Hey, Sofia, if I can give you a quick answer and then flip to John for the rest of it, I think it might serve the viewers better. I would just point out that some of this comments about the 1,000 to 5,000 Cuban troops is a little bit of geopolitics being played, because there is a UN resolution that's out there that's wanting to lift the sanctions in Cuba. And so some of this is just pushback from the U.S. on Cuba, basically trying to tie them to the war in Ukraine for purposes of votes at the UN. In terms of the military side of it, it's meaningful in the sense of that he's got to look to allies, but I think, as John can better explain to me than I can, the effect on the military side is not much. John?
No, I agree. Look, we've heard Cubans. So I've seen numbers in the media from 5,000 to 20,000. We know Chechens are fighting there. We know that North Koreans are fighting there. We know that we've seen advisors, if you will, at least from China, that are fighting there or advising there, learning how to fight. So it's not uncommon, I think, for Russia to import fighters to do their bidding for them. Part of the problem is the base that Russia is pulling from now are generally conscripts, young men, older men who have zero military experience, whereas the soldiers from Cuba, North Korea, and other countries bring experience, at least tactical experience in fighting. So it provides them, as we used to say in previous articles, an arsenals of evil. Now you can add Cuba to that arsenal as far as manpower is concerned. And by the way, I'm pretty sure Cuba is going to get discounted oil in exchange for the gesture. So we'll see.
And I want to continue on this topic of allies support to Russia. And according to Ukrainian intelligence, North Korea is sending Russian up to half of its ammo, and I'm talking about 200 and 260,000 artillery shells every month. John, do you think that it actually means on the front line? And when we're talking about Ukraine, can we compare the situation with our Ukrainian partners? Do you think that they're sending enough ammunition to our soldiers?
Yeah, so from the North Korean perspective, North Korea has been supplying Russia munitions for the better part of 18 months in forms of artillery shells, 155 artillery shells. They're also providing the Coxing gun, which is a very powerful howitzer gun that can fire deep into Ukrainian territory, in addition to those North Korean soldiers and advisors. So they have been doing this for a while, and they have been receiving in exchange technology to help them build out their nuclear capable forces. Okay, so we've seen this. I do believe that the allies continue to provide munition support. And what you're seeing now is that the United States has said that they're going to provide additional targeting data, which is critical. And I say critical because with the addition of the Tomahawk missile, okay, which can drop, if you will, munitions, explosive munitions, clusters of munitions, they can use that particular system to go after these type of weapon systems and soldiers that are coming in their assembly areas in Russia, but also at their what we call ports of debarkation, the airfields, the seaports, their assembly areas, and the highway networks that are bringing that in. It's a critical component to the STOP strategy, which Mark and I wrote in our Substack article that talks about the Ukraine STOP strategy and how they can incorporate to win. But you have to stop the bleeding. You have to stop the flow of Russian soldiers into Ukraine, and then you have to stop their ability to fund the war. Tomahawk missile does all those things, but interdiction's key to stop the flow and stop the weapon systems. And oh, by the way, I forgot to say, ballistic missiles, North Korea is providing them as well.
I want to touch on the so-called unknown or unidentified drones that keep being spotted not just in Central but also in Western Europe. And I have a question for both of you, and I just want to understand why do you think it's still unclear who is launching these drones? I don't want to speculate, but for me it seems that NATO countries are hesitant and not ready to officially say that it's Russia and it's on Russia.
Sure. Look, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is going to be difficult because the FSB is going to put layers of ambiguity between the launchers and who's being funded and equipped with the drone activity and getting that back to Russia. So as we say in intelligence, follow the money. Okay, the drone activity we're seeing over, at least the airport in Munich, but also over Denmark. We don't know if these are just reconnaissance drones that are loitering over certain areas to disrupt, if you will, commercial traffic. Airflow, let's also consider that in Germany at this time of the year, we're in the midst of Oktoberfest. So it's all about creating disruption, trying to instill fear through chaos and intimidating the West without it being tied back to them. I would, as an analyst, be able to say that I believe if FSB is involved, that there are sleeper cells that have been in NATO countries for decades that have been activated, and those, if you will, weapon systems or those drones have been fed to them, and now they are conducting those operations. So it's not clear, but it's also not meant to be clear. But we have to get beyond proof beyond a reasonable doubt and be able to act upon probable cause. Mark?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, look, Ukraine wrote the book initially on how to do this behind enemy lines. I mean, your own masterful taking out of strategic bombers across Russia with drones showed just how far, how deep, how wide you can get. And I think John is right on. From an economist standpoint, you got to follow the money. You got to reverse engineer where this is coming from. Probably not that difficult. Look, these are probably, without having seen the evidence at this point, simple type of drones that you can buy. I mean, kids can get them at stores, et cetera. And so you just want to kind of reverse engineer that to find out where it's being bought, who's buying it, where it's ending up at, and you'll probably see it. In terms of purpose at this point, it's hard to know. At this point, a plane's not been brought down, no explosives have been dropped, et cetera. It seems to be more disruptive. So at least in this early phase, it's messaging, but you don't want to let it get to like a 9/11 situation where it's kinetic and that it's catastrophic. So I think it's something that Europe has to address urgently. And then they just got to call it on the line with Russia. I think the best way to respond is to say, look, we see you, we get it. Now here's the consequence in Ukraine. This is why we're implementing a no-fly zone. That's what we really need to be doing. It's not a time to play games. And just quickly, I'd add to that, Israel sort of mapped out the way here for us, right? After October 7th, they said, we're done playing games with Hezbollah, with IRGC-backed militias in Syria and Iraq, with the Houthis, et cetera. And they systematically started saying, you ratchet it up, we're going to ratchet up that escalation ladder faster than you can climb. That's what Europe needs to be doing now. And in my opinion, do it with a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Sky News military analyst Professor Michael Clark said last week that Ukraine could conduct a surprise attack on Crimea before the winter. John, do you feel that this scenario is still on the table? Is Ukrainian army is capable of conducting such full-scale operation against Russia's military infrastructure?
Well, as Mark and I have stated, and we have cited, General Ben Hodges, who used to be the commander of U.S. Army Europe, Crimea is decisive terrain. Crimea, when you own Crimea, you own, in a sense, influence over the Black Sea with, surface-to-surface missiles, surface-to-sea missiles, extension with artillery and air bases. You control the Black Sea, and then also from Russia's perspective, they control or they can defend southern Russia. So Crimea is critical, and I believe that it's on the list, obviously, of territories that they being Ukraine, want to liberate. But they have to set those conditions. And right now they're setting those conditions by taking out air defense networks that prevent the Russians from stopping additional strikes, if you will, from Flamingos and from drones and from the Neptune missiles. I think we'll probably start seeing, again, threats against the Kerch Street Bridge. When that bridge comes down, I believe you're going to see an assault of some type, a counteroffensive of some type to re-seize Crimea. But it's hard to mask mass, okay? I mean, so Ukraine will have to mass an armor force with artillery and personnel, and it's going to be difficult in this time and age with satellite technology and drones. But I do believe that the ultimate target for Ukraine is going to be to liberate Crimea. Now, whether they do Crimea first and the occupied territories second, it's a tactical situation dependent upon what's on the ground and how the war continues to fight out today, out to 3-6 months from now. Mark, what do you think?
And Mark, do you feel that this would be the best chance for Ukraine to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table by conducting such a large operation against Russia?
Yeah, Daniel, it's a great question. And John is right, though. There's a tactical choice here to be made. And so I've got to be careful at high altitude to say one is better than the other, because there are real lives of troops, soldiers, et cetera, in play. And you never want to give away any ideas to the enemy, right? Whether it's the Donbass or whether it's Crimea, that's up to Zelensky and his generals to figure out what's the best way to make that play. But I would argue, in terms of Crimea, ultimately, General Ben Hodges is right, mutual friend of all of us. He said that Crimea is that decisive terrain of this war. I would even go one step further and say, look, there's also another war here now. There's Putin's war against Eastern Europe. And so it's decisive terrain as well in terms of what is Transnistria going to look like in the future? What is Moldova going to look like in the future? Potentially, what is even Georgia going to look like in the future? And I'll give a little teaser. John is working on an article for us talking about all of those things, all of these satellite states, if you will, of Putin, that are resting a bit here. And so Crimea could be exceptionally decisive in that regard as well. But that's for Thursday. There's the teaser, but we'll release that on our Substack soon.
Thank you, Mark and John, for joining us today. It was a big pleasure to speak with you both.
Pleasure.
Well, Daniel and Sofia, great. Thanks for having us back on the show. It's always a great opportunity for us to talk Ukraine.
Cheers, Sofia. Take care.